Today we take a look at the majestic miniatures that are known as bonsai with a gardener who's devoted his life to the art and science of growing them. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart in Georgia.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Bring the outdoors into your everyday life. Bass Pro Shops can outfit all your adventures, even those in your backyard. Bass Pro Shops, your adventure starts here.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes an SUV.
Bonsai, the Japanese art form using trees grown in containers, dates back over 1,000 years. It focuses on long-term cultivation of one or more trees. The primary purpose is not agricultural, but solely for the pleasure of the gardener and its viewers. The author of the ancient work, The Tale of the Hollow Tree, eloquently wrote, "A tree that is left growing in its natural state is a crude thing. It is only when it's kept close to human beings who fashion it with loving care that its shape and style acquire the ability to move one." In this sense, the art of bonsai goes well beyond a taming of nature and seeks to coax the greatest potential out of each plant that is in the care of the gardener. It only takes a few moments with Rodney Clemens to see that the heart of this energetic plantsman exudes the very notion that every plant under his watchful eye will be elevated into the form and figure that allows it to be experienced at its very best. Rodney began his love affair with bonsai back in 1973, and he's never looked back. His work designing Japanese gardens and natural water features has helped him develop a sensitive eye and a skill with rock and plant placement, which adds realism to his bonsai creations. He is a well-known lecturer and instructor who spends most of his time tending his extensive collection of bonsai at his nursery, All Good Bonsai. His wife, Charlie, is masterful with the art of bonsai as well, and the two of them have built an amazing life together, drawing every drop of potential out of the plants that fall into their care. Rodney, welcome to the show. It's so great to meet you. I've so long been energized by bonsai, and it's a whole category of horticulture that I find fascinating. Never done it as a gardener. I've always thought about it, had aspirations, and occasionally even bought a pot to try to do something, but never pulled it off. And of course, you've done this for decades now. And what initially sparked your interest in bonsai?
My initial interest was the fact that I love trees. And one day I was walking in a mall with a girlfriend, and at the very end of the mall I saw a trident forest. It was a bonsai show. And the closer I walked to that forest, the more passion came out of me. I walked right into the forest, I climbed it, and still am up in it. So
how did you move from being an enthusiast and starting the early years of working on plants to making this your full-time occupation?
I love it enough to stay in it full-time. It's something, of course, I really, really enjoy, and it's hard to separate something you enjoy from something you want to do all day long.
And so you started with just a few plants, and it became part of your broader garden collection, and
well, you know, my teacher said you need to have 3 trees so you don't overwork them. Right. And if you're like myself and you overwork things, then I had to have more than 3.
Right, right. Well, now you have, what's the size of your collection now?
We don't count.
Okay. That's fair enough, fair enough. Well, today I know we're gonna attempt to demystify the mystery that is bonsai and dig deep into some of the techniques and the methods, so that hopefully I'm going to be able to try this at home.
I hope so.
Great, let's dive in.
All right.
When I think of bonsai, I think of a very small plant in a small pot. And here we're standing by this magnificent plant it's taller than you and I.
Right. Bonsai simply means tree in container. And so it does not matter about the height of the tree, the size of the tree, as long as you have it in a bonsai pot. You can do really small ones or really large ones, and quite frankly, the large ones are a little bit easier to pull off because they give you more room for the scale.
Well, this is an ancient cypress. It's got to have a story, right?
It is. It was collected in an area that's a dwarf tree swamp, and it's 300 to 400 years old. Just an educated guess. It was an area near Naples, Florida. That's a beautiful little, it's hard to collect because you're seeing so many good trees. You walk around and which one did I want to collect? But this was easy. It only took me 2 miles to get it out of the swamp.
Tell me about the form on this, because it's a really nice flat top pruning.
Ball cypress grow in a flat top. And so a lot of people do bonsai in triangles. This triangle's inverted. The top is, and it comes down. So this is trees I want to make look like a tree, not like a bonsai.
Rodney, this is a wonderful example of a bonsai forest, and it's so different, the look, the feel of it, than the single bonsai plants I think most of us are familiar with. Tell me the story of this planting.
Well, this was a planting that my wife and I put together, about 2000. And it reminds me of my childhood, the cypress forest that I grew up in, playing in and everything. Doesn't have the water, but you got to be able to visualize things. Right. And so it's a great forest for playing in. What bonsai is all about to me is enjoying yourself.
How old are these trees?
They range in anywhere from 38, 40 years old to about 16. The youngest ones, of course, are the smaller ones in this case.
Well, I love the texture that you've created. It looks like one of those beautiful old growth forests with these towering, enormous trees, and the little small ones that are trying to find just a little gleam of light so that they can get big as well.
Well, this is the view for this couple weeks, because we rotate all around so that sunlight gets to all these. Otherwise, the branches start actually changing to catch the sun. They're solar collectors. As I'm turning it, I'd like for you to tell me which way you like the best. It's a lot of fun for me.
Wow.
You can even look at it from the side. I mean, that gives you a lot of depth.
You know, it's a totally different grove now, and when I'm standing on this side, I feel like I'm inside of the forest and I'm looking out into the field or the pond where the light breaks. And from the other side, it's as if I'm looking into the forest, and this feels a little bit more cool and the other side feels a little bit warmer, but they do evoke completely different emotions, and I have to say it's a tie.
Well, actually, giving you the compliment, you should get into bonsai again, and that's the best answer anybody's ever said.
Well, thank you. This is an amazing tree. I have this vision of this 1,000-year-old juniper growing out of a crack in a rock on the side of a cliff.
We always try to make our bonsai look really old. And this one was easy. The older they are to begin with, the easier it is to give you that illusion. And this tree's probably in the 500 to 600-year-old range.
So talk to me about the white wood on this. Is this the way that you found this plant, or is this a technique that you use to make it look more aged?
When you first collect them, this came from South Dakota, collected in South Dakota. And because they're in such a rough situation, the wood does age and bleach out. This has actually been redone because that changes in the south with all the humidity. And this is lime sulfur put on, which basically turns into sulfuric acid and actually bleaches the wood out. So it is an important thing.
So when you went about the process of removing that bark, was this part of the tree live, or was this a part of the tree that had died already?
Well, when I got this tree, it was an upright tree, and it had bark all the way around it, and I got it for the shape that it had at that point The first thing you should do is check to make sure how much of the tree is alive. And most of that tree was actually dead, all but this live vein, so it changed the style totally on me. And so taking off the dead, which that bark will last for a long time on the tree, it prompted this style.
Wow, well, the outcome's amazing. I do want to talk about the copper wiring. One thing I do know about bonsai is that the wires are used to shape the branches, and here's a
Exactly.
great example of that.
Yeah, like you say, they're to shape the branch, not to restrict it in any way. And basically you're putting the wire on and you're bending the branch. That bending creates a little bit of an issue and damage, and that forms scar tissue. That holds the branch in place.
I get the sense in talking with you, Rodney, that each one of these really old plantings tells a story. It's intended to, right?
It is. It's a personal thing. You've got to feel the story to create the piece.
So these are boxwoods. It's a fairly common plant that's used in bonsai.
It is.
What's the story here?
In bonsai terms, it's called a Kingsville. But Henry Holman, who started the tree, called it a Buxus microphylla compacta, and that's what I choose to call them.
Okay, and so how old are these?
These trees are right at 45 years old, and I know that because I took the cuttings.
And it's a wonderful composition. What was your inspiration for this?
My inspiration was a troubling one. I was doing this program, and I had two separate sizes of trees. These have grown a little bit, but they were much smaller than the larger tree. I did not know how to put them together. The night before, my grandfather had died, and so 3 o'clock in the morning, I realized that my grandfather could be this tree and all the grandchildren could be the other trees. And so it was a great program. I really enjoyed myself, and I created a scene from the homestead where you had these live oaks that overlooked the intercoastal waterway. And I took a little liberties with it by adding boulders and then symbolizing the water.
So this composition, it includes the boulders and the little gravel shoreline, and it's much more intricate than the other ones we've seen.
Yeah, it's showing a little bit more of the story just without your imagination taking over. And this really is not bonsai, it's psyche. And so it's a little bit of a different term, but it still can be in the garden without me kicking it out.
Right, it's beautiful. I want to talk a little bit about small bonsai. We've looked at some really large specimens and some forests, and the small plants are where nearly everyone starts, and it seems like that'd be the easiest way to start because there's, what appears to be a lot of extra work with these big ones, but that's not always the case.
It's not always true. The more work that the big ones have is really in the amount of pruning you might have to do, the number of leaves and everything. But the small ones, because of the scale and the need for water, are a lot harder.
Right, and these are going to require quite a bit more water because they don't have the same reservoir that the large ones do.
Right, and the pot gets hot. These pots get 140 degrees, so they dry out quick.
Wow.
And so these are watered twice a day at least, and sometimes 3 times a day.
That's a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go and talk about some of these individual plants. Each one of these are so different, and they're fascinating.
Well, thanks. This is a Japanese maple. Kotohime is the variety. This came to America from Japan as a cutting. I've grown it for about 35 years now, and it's one of the things I like about bonsai, and this is very important with a small one. The root system is incredibly important. So you see a nice root system, the taper of the tree is nice, and then a small leaf. So it makes the tree look further away. That's part of the scale that's hard to pull off is leaf size.
You've got an azalea here?
It's a nice azalea. It's very nice because of the leaf and the flower is a little bit on the smaller side. And this again shows you the power of the roots and everything.
Right.
Bonsai is horticulture, and you got to keep these plants happy and healthy. And so it's in a pot right now that it's going to grow nice and strong because of the size of the container. But when it's going to be shown, it goes into a pot that's much smaller, like this. And you can only keep it in this pot for a year.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're in a system. You get it healthy, then you slowly get to this size.
Right. So this little guy here?
This is hawthorn, and this was collected because it tripped me and I got upset at it. But the leaf size is nice, and this has gotten a lot smaller because of being in the pot. Flower size is fantastic, and the fruit is to scale for something this small. It's exfoliating, shows that nice color. And then you can see some of the bark is still coming off, but we remove the bark this time of year just to show that.
Right. Right here you've got one of my favorite of all the native trees, the winged elm, but I think this is going to be the first bonsai that I make.
Well, great. That one's for sale.
Oh yeah, I'll just have to buy that one.
Yeah, there you go. But this, this tree, as you know, it's an older tree, but it easily could be, 40, 50 feet tall if it was in the ground. And so this is the one that shows you can cut back pretty hard. That thick trunk is because the tree was a little bit taller than this. It was not grown that size in the pot.
Wow.
Just cut back.
Yeah, those are great. Rodney, I think this little group of trees really shows off the diversity of the category, that bonsai is way broader than the typical 3 or 4 plants that we often see.
It really is. You can make a bonsai out of anything, but these are really good for bonsai. And they're unusual in the bonsai world because most people have never used them. They're collected all around the southeast. These 3 trees, 2 of which were in Louisiana, 1 in South Georgia, near Valdosta.
So this is a water elm, not a true elm, but a fairly common native, right?
It is pretty common around water.
Okay.
And, but people walk right by it without seeing it because it just blends in.
And so these are quite old. They don't necessarily look like they would be as old as some of the bigger plants that we've seen.
Right. Their life cycle and is very short as far as them being able to produce food. The reason is they don't live in the sun for very long, so their growth period is short, their growth season. And this one here grows in the deeper part of the lake, so it gets less sun for a shorter amount of time. This grows a little bit closer to the shallows, so it gets sun earlier in the year and for longer of a period. But this one, both of these are in the hundreds of years.
Wow.
This one's just a little older theory-wise, my theory, because it's growing in more water, deeper.
Wow. Well, it does a great job of underscoring what you can do, and especially with plants that we don't typically think of as bonsai.
Bonsai can be any plant. It's just got to be in a bonsai pot.
Rodney, you've got me hooked now, and I'm going to leave here when we get done, driving straight to my garden center, and I'm going to pick out a couple of trees that I'm going to turn into bonsai. What should I be looking for? Are there any plants that I should avoid, and are there some that you really like that traditionally people have more success with?
I would not pick any exotic plant that's a little harder to grow or out of our area. But you're looking for something with small leaves and short internodes. So a magnolia might be ruled out. Right. It can be done, but it would be ruled out. So you're wanting healthy, you want a nice line, and you want a good root system. Those are hard to build. The branches, you can put everything where you need to put them.
Right, so between, say, conifers and angiosperms, gymnosperms, are there ones that are typically easier or harder to work with?
Well, most of the bonsai books show you the pine tree juniper style, and that's what most people are used to and expect a bonsai to look like. The deciduous grows in its own style. I mean, you can go out and look at the way an oak grows. It's a little bit different. And so the easiest tree to start with would be a juniper, some type of juniper.
So we brought our plants home, and how do we move that plant, make the transition from the little nursery pot into the nice round or flat bonsai container that we bought?
Well, it's a process, and the first thing you're going to do is pull it out of the container and check the root system out. And what you're doing is pruning to a plate. And so you want to prune the tree to where it can always go in a bonsai pot. The tree, when you collect it or you get it out of a nursery container, has the most energy it's ever going to have at a certain point, a certain sense. And so you want to cut it to where it will sit in the bonsai pot right from the start. Looks a little rough, but you want to prune it delicately. And the thing about the roots are, you want to always prune back past the growth tips and cut the old roots out because they're not working anymore. So you want to cut them back, then let the new roots come out. They're the ones that are doing most of the work.
So pruning roots is a lot like pruning the top of a plant.
You're stimulating new roots, yes.
Right, and we get little bud breaks behind that, so you get more of those really fine feeder roots that allows it to uptake better water and nutrition.
Exactly. What you want with the roots is it not going around to the outside of the pot and living around the outside with water and air. What you want is a matrix where the roots go all the way through the soil particles.
Now let's talk about the soil, because with bonsai, we're not going to typically use the milled pine bark that it would have been grown in a nursery. We're going to use a media with better drainage and great nutrient holding capacity too.
Absolutely, and you want it to be very healthy and hardy. So this is top of the line mix, and it's 3 particles. One part is lava stone, and it traps air. Air stays in it. The other part is pumice, and the pumice holds moisture. The part that we can't get in this country yet, it's being worked on, is akadama, which means red dirt in Japanese, and that holds nutrients. And so between the 3, you've got water, air, and nutrients. Everything's covered in 3 products. You can't do that in pine bark. The pumice and the lava stone can be, it's grown in this country or made in this country, produced in this country, so it can be found. But the akadama is the one that's you're going to have to go on the internet for.
So we now come to the part of our bonsai adventure where we need to prune the plant. And this is where we create form and structure, determine which limbs we want to keep and which ones we want to let go of.
And stimulate growth.
That's right. This is kind of what the romantic Zen part of the process.
Absolutely.
So we have a deciduous plant, and then we also have a conifer here. Let's talk a little bit about the different ways that we would prune each of these categories.
Okay. They're a little bit different in the sense with a deciduous tree, you're letting it grow at the first part of the year. That produces the food, and that feeds the tree, and then you cut it back. And it's mainly directional pruning. And so when I do something like this, if I prune to the second, you prune to the second or the third, I'm cutting it off, that bud's gonna produce a branch that runs that direction.
So over here we've got a juniper. This is a very common landscape plant. You can find this at nearly any retail garden center, and it's a great place to start with bonsai.
It really is. It's a tough plant. The difference is you let this run. The energy is in the foliage itself, and so you let it run, then you prune back, you flatten the branch out, which is like a pine tree grows. You flatten the branch out, you shorten it on top, and you let the outside edge run, and then that produces foliage back inside, then you can prune it back to that.
And one thing we need to remember on junipers is true of many conifers. We don't want to cut back beyond the last green leaf. Oftentimes we won't get new buds emerging.
Yes, you want to leave, and especially juniper, again, I can't say enough, that outside layer of growth is very, very important.
Right. What are some other tips that you would have for our viewers that are wanting to dive into bonsai when it comes to other kinds of maintenance? So pest, water, fertilizer?
Well, the pest control is like what anybody that's growing a plant has to look for. They're all the same. You got to deal with it. Water thoroughly. When you water to where it's fully hydrated. Fertilizer, use some fertilizer. I use organics, but anything you use will be fine. Sunlight's important, like we're out here in the sun ourselves, but the plants need the sun to produce their food. That's where they're getting it from.
Well, Rodney, thank you so much for spending the day with us. We learned so much, and I'm super excited about bonsai now.
Great. Thank you for everything. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Each week we travel the country north to south, east to west, visiting some of the most exciting gardens, as well as talking to industry horticulturalists about design principles, new plants, and also how you can be most successful with your home gardens. We also love answering your gardening questions, so visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Bring the outdoors into your everyday life. Bass Pro Shops can outfit all your adventures, even those in your backyard. Bass Pro Shops, your adventure starts here.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes an SUV.
Whether they're centuries old or just a few short years, bonsais inspire us with their nearly limitless possibilities. And today we've picked up some of the tricks of the trade from a master grower. If you have questions about anything you've seen today, visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember, even if you're a master gardener, there's always more to learn. So join us next week for more great gardening tips and ideas as we garden smart.